Hello and welcome back to Parc Fermé Parlay with Kieran Downey after a pretty decent Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. I know we were all kind of slagging it off, but who says you can't pass an Imola? Because, my God, that was actually, out of nowhere, a very exciting race. I thought we were in for another Suzuka. I thought we were in for a Japan 2.0. You basically finish as you start and that's it. But no. Imola had other plans and thought, you know what, we're going to give you a pretty good race. I'm not going to say it was a banger, but it was decent. And we've got quite a bit to talk about and I can't wait to get into it. It's time to crack open a Sublime Lime Diet Coke. And let's get into it, shall we? All right, starting proceedings with Kick Sauber. Gabriel Bortoleto, who qualified 14th, finished 18th. And Nico Hülkenberg, who qualified 17th, finished 12th. I don't really have much to say for either of these drivers, to be honest with you. Hülkenberg, in all things considered, probably was on a decent strategy, starting on the hards, which did actually seem to be the preferred tyre for this Grand Prix. The medium just really struggled in the sort of first stint. All the drivers that started on the medium went through a really rough patch. If they persevered and pushed through it, such as your Max Verstappen, your Alex Albons, it did pay them back. The tyres sort of got back into a working window. They also had a benefit from a VSC. We'll come and talk about that later. But Hülkenberg started on the hards. Definitely the right choice for him. He had a pretty decent working tyre. He managed to gain some track position through quite a few early pit stops, and I thought we were actually on for a Hülkenberg point. Kind of unravelled through the virtual safety car, and he did lose out a little bit there. Not a terrible finish from Hülkenberg, finishing 12th. There was a possibility that he could have scraped by a point, but the safety car did really just eat into the final stages of the race, and there was no real way to capitalise on the final 10 laps. But I'm going to say for Sauber, particularly for Nico Hülkenberg, an impressive, maybe not impressive, but a promising weekend. He looked racy out there. The car didn't look to be that slow neon wheelie bin that we expect from Sauber. It was looking decent. So I definitely think that Sauber will be coming away from this weekend feeling pretty positive from the race that Nico Hülkenberg just had. Bortoleto, I think it's just unfortunate. I think it's a rookie in a not great car, round a track you can't really overtake on, even though I know I've just said there was quite a few overtakes. Beside the point, it is what it is. Next up is Williams with Alex Albon, who qualified 7th, finished 5th, and Carlos Sainz, who qualified 6th, finished 8th. Can I just say, first of all, props to the Williams mechanics who managed to get Alex Albon's car fixed and ready for the Grand Prix. About half an hour before the pit lane opened, maybe not even that, Williams discovered a leak with Alex Albon's car. I don't know whether it was fuel or water. I think it was water. And there was a hell of a lot of work going on to that car. They had the floor off it. The mechanics were all underneath it trying to figure out where it was coming from. They managed to get it sorted, get the car onto the track. And Alex Albon had a pretty decent race. He was feeling a little bit sassy, as Alex Albon tends to be at the moment. He went really long on his first stint and he wasn't that keen on it. He came through the radio and was like, guys, I don't think this is the right call. However, he had strategist Carlos Sainz kicking around behind him, who, whilst running a Grand Prix, can also seem to help Williams with strategy calls. Quite a bit into the race, Alex had managed to find himself at P3 through some nice overtakes and through some drivers taking some quite early pit stops. Williams had told Sainz that Albon was actually lapping 0.6 slower than what Sainz was currently doing on fresher tyres. Sainz was back over the radio saying, if that's what Alex is doing, he is definitely on a one-stop. Keep him to that, which they did. Williams kept Albon to the one-stop strategy, which Albon was complaining about. He wasn't keen on being left out on those tyres. He thought it was going to hurt his race. He was in a pretty decent position. And actually, one, it was the right call, because if he had just pitted naturally, if they'd found him a decent gap, he would have come out and been on such a tyre offset to the rest of the teams that had pitted so early and been able to gain track position that way. However, what they didn't bank on was a virtual safety car that played perfectly into Albon's hands. It gave him pretty much a free pit stop, got him back out on fresher tyres, and it meant that he could continue higher up the grid. He was then running pretty sweetly. I'm pretty sure he pitted again when the safety car was out. In the final stages of the race, was having a superb battle with Charles Leclerc. He did get pushed off, and I'll come and talk about this a little bit more when we talk about Charles Leclerc, because he wasn't happy about it. He did actually get pushed off when he was trying to go round the outside of Tamburello. I do believe it was Albon's corner. Leclerc ran him wide into the gravel, and he was unfortunate to lose positions to Hamilton behind him as well. However, Albon, always the steady head, didn't let it get to him, went back on the attack and actually got the position given back to him because Ferrari told Leclerc to do so, which is the right call. I have to say it was a superb race for Alex Albon. He should be so happy. I actually thought we were going to get an Alex Albon podium. I thought we were going to get Albon on the podium, and it came so close, and I was so hoping for it, but he just didn't have it in him to keep Oscar Piastri behind him. Oscar was just too fast for Albon to keep him behind. It's unfortunate, but it's just the way Formula One is. McLaren has the more dominant car. It is amazing that Alex Albon is even in that position to be fighting for a podium position against Oscar Piastri. Finishing P5 in that race is a phenomenal result for the Williams team, and it's a whole load of points. They're absolutely smashing it. I say it every week when it's a good result, but long may it continue. His teammate, on the other hand, Carlos Sainz, who, again, very respectable finish, getting points, finishing P8, was slightly on the wrong strategy. I think they put him on a two-stop. They committed to a two-stop. They pitted him early. And they did the same with George Russell, and in that second stint, they really hurt. They couldn't get the tyres to work the way they wanted them to, and it did just kind of work against them, unfortunately. As I said, Carlos Sainz doing wonders for Williams, able to help guide them on their strategy, which managed to get Alex Albon a P5. I think Sainz will be a little bit gutted, especially after his performances throughout the rest of the sessions, going fastest in Q2. Knowing that he had more performance in him in Q3, but just couldn't extract it out. Qualifying 6th is in no means a bad position, but he knew he could do better, and unfortunately the race just sort of came away from him. 8th was probably the best that he could do. Nobody counted on the fact that we were going to get a VSC. Nobody counted on the fact we were going to get a safety car towards the end of the race that was going to take so many laps before it went in. All of these things just sort of coupled up, but I think the decision to put him on the two-stop was where his race began to go. You could see the same was happening for George Russell. It was a bold move, might have been the right move had things not went the way they went. But it's, it's coulda, woulda, shoulda. Still decent points in the bag for Williams. And I think at this rate, if you'd have said this last year, we'd be saying if they can get anywhere close to a P10, fucking take it. Any points is great points. And the same still applies now. Any points is great points. But I feel Williams and Carlos and everything will be wanting more because they can see the capabilities of that car, the performance of that car. They can see that they can get a little bit more. And it will come to them. It will definitely come to them. This is one race out of 24. They've had some stellar performances so far. We've still got a very long season ahead of us. We're only just over a quarter into it. I have no doubts that we will see some more phenomenal racing and phenomenal finishes from Carlos Sainz. Moving on to V-Carb, and we have Liam Lawson, who qualified 16th, finished 14th, and Isaac Hadjar, who qualified 9th, finished 9th. Lawson didn't really see him much throughout the broadcast, to be honest with you. He was kind of in no man's land for quite a bit of it. I think he was attempting an undercut by pitting on lap 10, which we actually seen worked wonders for Charles Leclerc. Much like Charles Leclerc, he did get a little bit unlucky with the timing of the virtual safety car. Didn't really have the pace to go and attack on a circuit that's hard to overtake on. It's all she wrote. Hadjar, in terms of his own race, a P9, couple of points in the bag, not bad at all. Hadjar was crucial in this race, which is funny to say because he did finish P9, but Hadjar managed to gain some track position through quite a few of the drivers in front of him, taking quite early pit stops, your George Russells, your Charles Leclerc's, all that kind of stuff. He then ended up P4, and they kept him out. And I don't know whether there was a little bit of a conversation happening between the Red Bull pit wall and the V-Carb pit wall, which I know people are not that keen on happening. But I imagine there was a little bit of a conversation, a little bit on the hotline down to VCarb at a crucial point in the race when Red Bull was trying to find the right time to pit Verstappen so that he would come out in a nice gap, wasn't going to be held up in traffic. He was building a decent gap between him and Piastri in second. The real question was, when are they going to pit Verstappen and where will he come out? Where Hadjar came into this, and whether or not this was by accident or was on purpose, which I imagine it was, Hadjar was lapping at the same time about a second slower than Verstappen. What that was doing was holding up the rest of the pack behind Hadjar so that it would create a nice little gap in between Hadjar and Norris for Verstappen to pit and come out third. Obviously, what then added to that was Verstappen being able to pit under the safety car, but Hadjar being that second slower at that point in the race was vital for Red Bull and for Max Verstappen to just create enough of a gap so that Verstappen wouldn't lose too much positions but would come out in a nice gap around P3. Not a bad finish for Hadjar, P9, couple of points in the bag, lovely. Crucial are these points because they are currently in a fight between Alpine beneath them and Aston Martin above them in the constructors. So that couple of points when Aston Martin couldn't score any and neither could Alpine, those couple of points are huge. Unfortunate that Liam Lawson couldn't score any, but that's by the by. Moving on to Haas, and Esteban Ocon, who qualified 18th, did not finish, and Oliver Bearman, who qualified 19th, finished 17th. I was quite impressed by how bold Haas went with Esteban Ocon. The race started, we were just finishing lap 1 and Ocon was peeling into the pits to get a fresh set of hard tyres on. I admired how aggressive they were going with him. It didn't pan out the way they wanted it to. Those drivers that pitted really early, I mean, Ocon was the extreme of that on lap 1. The rest were, around lap 10, but they really began to hurt on their tyres in the later stages of that stint. So I appreciate the boldness and how aggressive Haas went with it. It just wasn't the right plan. Unfortunately, the whole thing unravelled for Ocon anyway. He ended up retiring from the race. I think it was, I don't know what the exact issue was. There was a power issue unit. He just lost all power coming out the Tosa hairpin, pulled over to the side, and that was it. It was a DNF, thus causing the virtual safety car that allowed Max Verstappen to peel into the pits and benefited him greatly. So Ocon was actually a bit of a key player inadvertently, not in a way we'd have wanted to be. Oliver Bearman, who started 19th, started on the hards, might as well, you've got nothing to lose. He started 19th. Obviously, nobody can predict we're going to get a VSC, and I actually thought he was going to retire as well, because not long after Ocon had retired, Bearman was into the pits, and I thought it was a retirement as well for the same issue, but nope, fresh set of boots and off he went. It really just wasn't his weekend. Moving on to Alpine, and Pierre Gasly, who qualified 10th, finished 13th, and Franco Colapinto, who qualified 15th, finished 16th. One thing I love watching in Formula One, amongst quite a lot of things, is watching a fight on track between Charles Leclerc and Pierre Gasly. You can just tell that there is a bit of history there because they will fight each other hard. It's like watching Oscar and Max fight. It's like watching Max and Charles fight. There's just a bit of something there. Unfortunately for Gasly, it was a bit too bold a move trying to go around the outside at Piratella. Gasly ended up on the gravel at Piratella, went from P9 to P14, and that was kind of it for Gasly. Again, didn't really see him for the rest of the race. Unfortunate that he couldn't pick up any points. Looked promising, to be fair, from a P10 start that we could maybe get some points from Gasly, but just, again, not really his weekend. Colapinto was an interesting one. Obviously crashing during Q1 yesterday. Actually had made it through to Q2 because he'd already set his time, so qualified 15th. Actually lost a couple of positions on the outset just by being very, very careful. In fact, he was probably just being a little bit too cautious around the hairpin up towards Piratella, where he lost like 2 or 3 positions and just never really made an impression again. I imagine there was maybe something said to him after his crash. Flavio Briatore had made a comment being like, Colapinto is here to keep the car on the track, score some points, and that's it. And then in his first competitive session in qualifying, he crashes the car. So I wonder if something's been said to him because he was just overly cautious in a way that we don't usually see from Franco Colapinto. It was quite interesting. I said this yesterday when I spoke about him in qualifying, but unfortunate that this is how his return to Formula One has happened. You know, under the circumstances that he's joined that team, there's been so many rumours and talk about him replacing Jack Doohan. It finally happens. There's so much attention on him. You know, he's such a centre of attention. He then goes and crashes his car, so he's drawing even more attention, and then just plays it far too safe. In fact, I wouldn't even call it safe. I'm just calling it overly cautious, and loses out and just never really begins to make an impression again. It'll be interesting to see how Colapinto does over the next couple of weekends. We've obviously got Monaco and then Spain coming up, and I'm just intrigued to see what happens, how his form is over those weekends. Aston Martin, and what a fall from grace that was, with Lance Stroll, who qualified 8th, finished 15th, and Fernando Alonso, who qualified 5th, finished 11th. Now, where the virtual safety car played beautifully into the hands of Max Verstappen, Alex Albon, Isaac Hadjar, it didn't really play into the hands of Aston Martin, and it's kind of their own fault. They, unlike a lot of the other teams, didn't have an extra set of hard tyres. They only had one set of hard tyres, so when the virtual safety car happened, they didn't pit. So it really hurt them badly. Everyone else got a cheap pit stop. When we went back to racing conditions, they just didn't have the tyres and just started losing positions. So Aston Martin's greatness to get them to where they were was really their own undoing, and probably the reason that they finished outside the points. I have to say, Fernando Alonso's radio message where he called himself the unluckiest fucking driver in the world really got to me, because it certainly seemed that way. Nothing went his way. At one point when he did pit and he was coming out the pits, both his front brakes were on fire. And I was like, oh my God, this is like last year. Remember when his brakes caught fire last year? Was it his brakes? I think it was. The man just couldn't catch a break, and on a weekend where he could have scored his first points, it was snatched away from him. We were so close to Alonso getting his first points of the season, and now I'm just wondering, are they ever going to come? Thankfully, Aston Martin, on the whole, in terms of their car, looked a lot better this weekend. Their qualifying, sensational. The car looked racy at certain points. The speed the pace, seems to have picked up quite a bit. So I'm fingers crossed we can see something. Maybe not in Monaco, but definitely in Spain. I'm hoping for something, because Monaco, I'm already thinking about my predictions for Monaco, and I've not a fucking clue, because it's just chaos anyway, isn't it? So you can think one thing and it'll just be completely opposite. We might see Colapinto on pole. So yeah, just really not the race for Aston Martin, and as I said, it's such a shame because they were looking so promising after qualifying, and I thought, this is it, here we go. And it's just all gone to pot. Next up, we've got Mercedes, and George Russell, who qualified 3rd, finished 7th, and Kimi Antonelli, who qualified 13th, did not finish. Can I just say, fucking George Russell. The one time I predict him to finish in the top 5, and he's finished in the top 5 in every race, and this race he decides I'll finish 7th. I mean, it wasn't really his decision, but still. Obviously, George was starting on mediums, but they were used mediums, because he'd obviously used a set of mediums in Q3. Fantastic idea at the time. Looking back, should we have maybe kept some mediums for this race? Potentially, so that you were starting on fresher tyres. And I know Jacques Villeneuve was giving it all this after the qualifying session, being like, more of the top teams should have done that. Should they, Jacques? Should they? Because George Russell might say otherwise, because he's not had a great time out there on those used mediums. When the lights went off, George Russell was right there, going into Tamburello, and, looked like he was really going to bring a fight, but Max and Oscar just peeled off and just left Russell, and then what we ended up with was this mad DRS train from Russell in 3rd, or had Norris passed him by this point? Yeah, Norris had actually got past him, and what we ended up with was a DRS train from Russell in P4 to Hamilton in P12 for a little bit of the race. Russell just kind of struggling out there, struggling with the rear of the car, the rear grip, wasn't happy on his tyres. Interesting that this is the first race where I would say this looked like a Mercedes that we've seen in the past couple of seasons, just a bit of a struggle for the drivers. But, could a top 5 finish been on the cards? Potentially. But, I mean, out of nowhere, the Ferrari had quite decent race pace. That straight line speed was no joke on the Ferrari. So probably not, actually, when you look at it. Probably not. It wasn't on the cards. Kimi Antonelli on his first home race, DNFing. Oh, my heart bleeds for the kid. What a shame. I actually am devastated for him. Absolutely devastated. The whole weekend's just been an absolute heartache for him. You know, it's his first home race. He's brought all his pals along with him. He gets knocked out in Q2 and then ends up DNFing. His first DNF of the season, and it's got to be his home race. It's a power unit issue for him. I'm absolutely devastated for him. Devastated through no fault of his own, through no issues. He's been let down by his car and has to retire. He was doing absolutely brilliantly defending from Hamilton. It took Hamilton like 35 laps. Yeah, 35 laps for Hamilton to get past Antonelli. Antonelli managed to hold up a 7-time world champion, Lewis Hamilton, for 35 laps. Well done, Antonelli, because that's actually class, but just a shame that it all ended in heartbreak. Moving on to Red Bull with their 400th Grand Prix, and what a result from Max Verstappen for them. But Yuki Tsunoda, who qualified 20th, started from the pit lane, finished 10th, and Max Verstappen, who qualified 2nd, finished 1st. Yuki started from the pit lane because he had to take a new chassis, survival cell and PU after his crash in qualifying yesterday. As I mentioned yesterday, glad to see that Yuki's okay, and an absolute stellar job from the Red Bull mechanics getting that car turned around for today's race, because that was a lot of damage. They pretty much probably had to build basically the car again completely. Tsunoda starting on the hard tyres, didn't really have huge amounts of pace on them. At one point he was told to hold up Piastri, who had pitted, and basically didn't really do much. Like, tried to hold up Piastri going into the Ravazzas. Piastri was just far too wise to it, and then just stuck behind him, got a nice bit of DRS, and very easily overtook him going down to Tamburello. Tsunoda would have gotten a bit of the benefit from the virtual safety car, being able to pit pretty cheaply. P10 is a very respectable result for Tsunoda, having started from the pit lane. So a pretty decent performance, just not the one that Red Bull would be wanting, especially with Max Verstappen winning. Max Verstappen winning his 65th race, winning Red Bull's 400th Grand Prix, and it is Max's 4th consecutive win at Imola. The man is incredible. I would go as far as to say Max Verstappen is the best driver on that grid right now. Hands down, no questions. Thank you, Your Honour. That move into Tamburello was absolutely sensational. It was bold, it was very Max Verstappen, and my God, it paid him beautifully. Coming alongside Piastri into that corner, really late on the brakes and just sailing round the outside of the McLaren. Absolutely chef's kiss. A move that you're like, yes, that is Max Verstappen. Just clean, hard racing. It was stellar. I absolutely loved it. Right from the jump, just absolutely sending it. Got the job done, and off he went. And really, I mean, I wouldn't say that his race was 100% won at that point, because he then got the benefits of Hadjar slowing up the field, the virtual safety car happening, like all these things just played into Verstappen's hands beautifully. Nobody was touching him. Absolutely nobody. He created such a gap in that opening stint. The virtual safety car happened. He got a pretty cheap pit stop, continued to build up that gap, pitted again on the safety car because he had enough time that he wasn't going to lose the positions, and then had a stellar restart and absolutely sailed, created such a huge gap after the restart with only 10 laps to go. We were like a lap and a half in after the restart, and he was already 2.7 seconds ahead of Piastri. The man is an incredibly talented driver, and I am in awe. The man was absolutely on rails today, and races like this is Max Verstappen saying, this is why I'm a 4-time world champion, and do not count me out of this title fight just yet. And you cannot count Verstappen out from being a title contender just yet. It is all to play for, and he is definitely in that fight. Verstappen was ready to risk it all to win that race. Going into that corner, he was ready to throw the whole thing away to get that job done, because it could have gone absolutely tits up. He could have been ran wide onto the gravel and lost a load of positions. He could have made contact with Piastri, but no, he knew what he was doing. He put it all on the line, and it absolutely paid off. Next up, Ferrari with Lewis Hamilton, who qualified 12th, finished 4th, and Charles Leclerc, who qualified 11th, finished 6th. Ferrari's quite an interesting one because they had pace. Like, the straight line speed of that Ferrari was no joke. And yes, Hamilton got held up by Antonelli for 35 laps, and how, I've got no idea, because he was absolutely cruising around other drivers. Like, the pace just came out of nowhere, and it shocked me. I was very surprised. Hamilton started on the hard tyres, as I said, had a bit of trouble getting past Piastri, but he looked very good. The race trim of that Ferrari was looking very decent, and after the restart from the safety car, those final 10 laps, Hamilton was absolutely flying. And at one point, I was like, could Hamilton get a podium? Like, could he get a podium? It was looking likely, and then I looked at the timing tower and I was like, yeah, he's only got a few laps left. He's got a 2-second gap to Piastri. He's not going to be able to close that down. But I'd say a very promising race from Ferrari after a very disappointing qualifying. The highs and lows, honestly, it's like roller coaster, whiplash of emotions dealing with this team. It's not for the faint of heart. I tell you that much, because you'll be absolutely deviled one day and then you'll be on cloud 9 the other day. It's just a constant roller coaster of emotions, I tell you that. Charles Leclerc, a roller coaster race, to be honest with you. That was a lot of ups and downs. They pitted him on lap 10 and I was like, far too early. And then he got a beautiful undercut done on Russell, and I was like, change my mind, don't listen to me. This is one of those rare occasions where I was like, my God, Ferrari have actually shown up to work today. They've got their heads screwed on. We're making good calls. I was so surprised by the whole thing. Even when Lewis Hamilton was begging to come in, the team were like, no, we don't want to bring you in because there's not a gap to bring you back out in. You'll just be in traffic. So please don't come in. And Hamilton was like, yeah, understood. It was one of these lovely moments where there was a little bit of cohesion between team and driver. We love to see it. But as I said, Leclerc, beautiful undercut done on Russell. And I was like, Ferrari have absolutely nailed this strategy. Because he started on mediums, they stuck him on hards. What didn't play into his hands was the timing of the virtual safety car, because he wasn't that long into his stint on the hards. And Leclerc wasn't happy about it. You could tell he was over the radio. He was complaining that he constantly gets fucked by the safety cars or virtual safety cars or the neutralizations of the races. He asked what they were going to do, and they came back over the radio and were like, you're staying out. We box you now, you lose 4 positions. Like, you just can't make these things up for Charles Leclerc. He is probably one of the most unlucky drivers in Formula 1. And although he was frustrated, he definitely turned that frustration into something, because he was looking decent on his race trim, much like Hamilton. Maybe not to the same level as Hamilton, because we didn't get a message after the race from Charles Leclerc like we did Hamilton, who was saying the car felt amazing and, you know, great stop strategy from the team and everything like that. He didn't really have much to say, mostly because he was told to give a position back to Alex Albon after he forced him off the track. Now, just a quick reminder, Alex Albon and Charles Leclerc are battling it out down the pitch straight. Albon goes round the outside at Tamburello, is pushed off the track and loses some positions to Lewis Hamilton and everything behind. It then got referred to the stewards. The team told Leclerc to hand the position back. The stewards have then come out and said no further action. Leclerc obviously not happy after he was told by the team to give the position back. His radio message saying, that's how racing is now. When you can't pass, you need to be let pass. This is a fucking joke. What did I do wrong? Leclerc was in the media pen after, was asked about the situation with Albon, and the reporter said, you know, you didn't leave him much room. And Charles said, no, but the rules are written in a certain way, so we use them to the maximum. We've seen it several times without there being a penalty. And that I will agree on. We have seen plenty of times where drivers have pushed someone else off the track and there's been no penalty. This is just one of those cases where there was. Did Charles Leclerc push Alex Albon off the track? Yes. Did Charles Leclerc get a penalty for it? No, because he gave the position back. This is one of those times where Formula 1 is just a little bit hypocritical, because have we seen plenty of times where drivers have forced someone else off the track and not had to concede a position or get a penalty? Yes. Unfortunately, this was not one of those times. I'm quite happy to admit, as a Charles Leclerc stan, that it was the right thing to do to give that position back to Alex Albon. He 100% pushed him off the track. Maybe not on purpose, but he didn't leave him the room. Charles was also asked after in the media pen if this weekend left him optimistic for Monaco, and his response quickly was no. So I don't even want to think about it because it's actually just a bit too depressing. Moving on. It is positive, I have to say, from Ferrari this weekend on a whole. They were looking actually like a Formula One team. The car looked like it had pace. The team looked like they were making decent decisions. We weren't hanging around waiting for ages. They were pretty staunch in their decision making. You know, when the safety car happened, Leclerc wanted to pit and they said no. He said, well, stick me on softs, it'll be better than this. And they were like, well, actually, no, there's still this many laps of the race. By the time the safety car had finished, what I will say is there was a 10-lap shootout. Could they have pitted Charles Leclerc and put him on softs? Yes. Would it have worked? Maybe, in theory, but because Lewis Hamilton had fresh tyres to stick on his car, that took priority, unfortunately, for Charles Leclerc. If they had boxed Charles Leclerc, he would have, as the team said, lost 4 positions, been on softs, had to work through more drivers in a shorter amount of time. It just didn't make sense for the team. It's one of these rare occasions I'm actually agreeing with Ferrari that he shouldn't have pitted. Granted, it didn't help him that he was on older tyres and really couldn't put up a decent defence against Hamilton or Albon or anything, but it is what it is. It's the way Formula One works. And finally, McLaren, with Lando Norris, who qualified 4th, finished 2nd, and Oscar Piastri, who qualified 1st, finished 3rd. It was actually quite refreshing to see Lando having a pretty decent race. There was things that worked against him, obviously, but that's just unfortunate. Nobody could have predicted that we were going to get a VSC pretty much directly after Lando had pitted, but he was let down a little bit by the team. They were bad on the pit stops this weekend. They were slow. Lando had one decent one, but the rest were all very, very slow. Something to do with that front right just not wanting to come off. But it was refreshing to see him have a nice race. He was doing some beautiful racing out there. He had a brilliant overtake round the Villeneuve chicane on George Russell, and just all round pretty decent. What I found interesting was, this is just where McLaren winds me up, because during the safety car period, whilst we were waiting for the restart, Lando came over the radio. He was behind Oscar, so it was Max, Oscar, Lando. Lando came over the radio and said, I can see that Oscar's tyres are absolutely gone. If we want to try and win this, you need to say to Oscar, like, you know what to do. Basically saying, you need to say to Oscar to let me past. And then he went on to say, I'm not telling you to let me through, but I'm just saying. Basically, you're telling the team you want to be let through, which is well within your right. You've got fresher tyres. You've got a better opportunity to go and attack Max. Gotcha. I'm all in. It does, however, go against everything that the team stand for at this current point. I've seen somebody on social media say McLaren have to make the call to get them swapped because Lando's best chance of going and winning this race. That's breaking papaya rules, babe. We can't be breaking papaya rules. Zach Brown and Andrea Stella have come out and said there will be no team orders placed on these drivers until one of them is mathematically out of winning the championship. It's a very long season. We've still got a lot to go. Both these drivers are in contention. They're sitting 1 and 2. We are not going to stop them from racing. We are not going to let another one through. It's up to them guys to race. And we did finally get a mini version of the intra-team McLaren battle. Not as dramatic as we thought it was going to be, but Oscar did some pretty decent defending against Lando to keep him back. Lando on much fresher tyres. And unfortunately for Oscar, he just couldn't keep Lando back behind him the entire time. It was a great overtake on Piastri by Norris. It was fair racing, hard but clean, very respectful from both the drivers. As I said, I've seen loads of people saying they should let him through, they should let Norris through. It goes against what McLaren keep telling us all, that there is no number one driver, we're not going to do it until mathematically someone's out. And McLaren is completely safe in the constructors at the moment. They didn't actually need to win this race. They're 1 and 2 in the drivers, so team orders don't really make any sense. A 2-3 in this race is still a pretty decent haul of points when In terms of the constructors, there's only one driver, really from their closest rivals, that's actually scoring any decent points. George Russell, who finished 7th, and Max Verstappen, who, yes, won the race, but that doesn't affect massively the constructors. It has affected the drivers, but it's still business as normal. It's still Piastri, Norris, and Verstappen. As I said, Norris just absolutely bided his time, waited until the correct moment when he had a bit of DRS, a slipstream, and just off he went and got the job done. Piastri, on the other hand, didn't have as much luck. Obviously lost out to Max Verstappen at Tamburello on the opening lap. The McLaren straight line speed, I will say, didn't look as good this weekend as some of their rivals. Didn't look that good yesterday in qualifying, didn't look fantastic today. Piastri had 2 very slow pit stops. He did get held up by Tsunoda only for a little bit, did manage to make it through. The undercut that McLaren was hoping for Piastri to get past Verstappen just didn't really play into his hands. It never materialised. He didn't unleash enough pace after he'd pitted. It was a slow pit stop. He was in traffic. It just all didn't really work in his favour. That being said, Piastri really tried hard to keep his race alive and was doing a brilliant job out there to do a little bit of damage control and claw back what he was losing. And like I said, unfortunately, when it came to the final sprint to the finish line after the safety car, he was on much older tyres. They'd completely gone. And it just got to a point where he'd done a brilliant job trying to keep Norris behind him, but Norris had slipstream, fresher tyres, a help in a DRS, job done. Couldn't really do it. Piastri is showing that he is a phenomenal driver. He is showing that he is way more consistent than Lando Norris, I will say that, and I can't imagine it's going to be too long before we see Piastri on the top step of the podium again. And that is everything from us from a pretty decent Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. I wasn't expecting a lot going into this race, but it delivered, I have to say. It wasn't an absolute banger, but it was good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching that race. Now there's not much time to rest as we are heading straight into another race week with the Monaco Grand Prix coming up next weekend. God knows what's going to happen there. We've got a pretty hectic Saturday coming with the qualifying session. Monaco qualifying is always one of the highlights of the year. We've got a nice chill Sunday, I believe, with probably a bit of a processional race on our hands. But it is the introduction of a new 2-stop strategy, mandatory. So we'll see what happens there. But that is everything from us. Let us know your thoughts on the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix in the comments down below. And make sure to follow us along on social media at Parc Fermé Parlay. We'll see you very soon. Love you. Bye.